This is for the African American whose ancestors were actually brought into North America as slaves. I am not interested in addressing this the other people can be interested in it, but I'm specifically looking at the 6% of the African slaves who were brought over by the British and some Americans who were brought into the United States, and the additional 3% who were brought in. That could have been from the Spanish. Well, actually, the Spanish also brought them in to North America as well. So I'm really concerned about that group. And I'm most specifically interested in the ones coming in from the English speaking, because I'm reaching out to you to help make you aware of the dire situation that we are in and to ask for your help in this. And the help I'm asking for is to help me shut down the occult that's going on in the United States at this time, and to remember who Jesus is about. Before I go in and I point out how we have people here from Ethiopia whose families engaged in slave trade, selling them to Islam. This is the Crown Prince of Ethiopia. And before I point out the Kenyans, like Barack Obama, whose family was never brought into the United States as a slave, as well as the other kinds of white, black Americans, I need to point out that these people are part of an elite group who don't care about you. And much of the Black Lives Matter is masking what's happening with the elites, with Elon Musk, what's happening with the vaccinations that they're coming out. In fact, Barack Obama and those groups never protested what Microsoft and what the eugenicists were doing with vaccines, both in India and in Africa. Many African Americans have grown up with some Christian religious background. And I'm reaching out to these people because what I became aware of as a whistleblower in the state of Florida for education and fighting for the rights of DJJ kids, kids of minorities, kids with special needs, but the general population as a whole of kids going to public schools and in public institutions, was that the white people in the state were clearly against you. And the white British people that are taking over the state are clearly against you. Now, having said that, I'm trying to bring together the Union of North America, bring Australia over, bring New Zealand over, free Australia up for the Chinese so that we can have global regionalization, because Christians are supposed to share, and that whole area needs more land to be stabilized, but also because our Five Eyes are spying on everybody, including your own people, and they have completely eroded what little democracy we had. The occult they are spewing on us, that have been taken over, Elon Musk and his dragon, with his Draco thrusters, has thrown the country into a tizzy. The British with their occult, Hollywood their occult, but especially if you go into Barnes and Noble, it's striking. Absolutely striking what has happened in the last 9 months. I went into Barnes and Noble a few times over the last week, and I would say probably 25% of the bookstore is for the occult. And that doesn't include the religious section, which is small compared to the occult section. If we look at the dragons and the dragons and the demons and the dragons, and they came after me. If I look at Elon Musk, and he's putting tens of thousands satellites up into the sky, which will be destroying the earth. And of course the dragon, the fiery dragon, is the bad, most wicked thing in the Bible, and it's the British and the Vatican. So although I've been hit by people who did OBing with Barack Obama. Barack Obama his family did not come over as slaves in the United States, and he's a white black man. Meghan Markle, I think her mom did come over as a slave. But the bottom line is that she's also a white black person, and they're all part of the British group. And I'm telling you right now, and believe it or not, I am representing Queen Elizabeth I, because she would never agree to all of this. Isabella of Spain would never agree to all of this occult. If I were to look at the former queens who helped launch the exploration that went on, none of them would agree to what's happening. And the second thing we have to look at is the role of the Vatican, because the Vatican is the other dragon. And when we talk about the dragon, we talk about a dragon individual on which Athens, that is Thracian, institutes everything that's happening in the Western world, as well as what happened into the Semitics. Before I pick on transgender African American people, and the African American civil rights movement completely backed Playboy by having Dr. Martin Luther King give his longest interview ever with a homosexual reporter with Playboy in 1965. Playboy was the major backer for abortions and Planned Parenthood. That brings you right into Microsoft. And it brings you right into the gentleman, I can't even think, his name escapes me. How can it? His whole family has a background in eugenics, okay? And he's been an avid person in terms of getting out this disease, which is constructed, which I've already shown it's been constructed, and the homosexuals have been deeply involved in it because they're deeply involved in AIDS research. Now I'm going to speak to African people and people in Jamaica and that area. They have encouraged your sexual immorality, and they have encouraged your group to have abortions. And all these African Americans these African American civil rights leaders encouraged Playboy, and they were all part of that group, which really, they set up shop outside of your communities to have abortions. Now, I was a whistleblower who have said for the last 20-some years, and since I've lived in the state of Florida, and I may be losing my teaching certificate very soon, and that is because I may miss what they consider to be some of the needed certification requirements that they prevented me from getting. But I got far more, and if I can show how they're not doing what they're doing, and I've already done all this other work. So the bottom line is, you never got the arts in your education system. Truly, they lie left and right in the state of Florida. They're not giving you your arts. Had they put music and vocal music in, it would have increased your brain capacity, and it would have helped you to learn mathematically. They could have given you real dance. They could have put cognitive behavior restructuring right into the core curriculum, which I told them to do. But if you had done all these things and opened up with morning prayer led by Native American Indians to our God in heaven, if you had brought the elders in, had you done the things that I put out there for you to have, you wouldn't be taken over with the occult right now. We would have had the Union of North America, which I put on the books to the Law Society in New Brunswick in 2001. All of these things went out already, and Barack Obama was aware of it. When I won the right for people that were contract workers for the government to have whistleblowing rights at the FCHR in the state of Florida, Barack Obama and the British and all of your white people went after me. My biggest problem has been with blogs. I invite you, I ask you, before I take you into all of this, I invite you to walk into Barnes & Noble, Spend some time looking over the occult sections, over the areas right before the juvenile section. It's full of the occult. It's full of Harry Potter. It's full of witchcraft. Their games are full of the dead and witchcraft and Games of Thrones and dragon. This is clearly the dragons from Thracian, which the British claim they have links to, which is claimed in the Vatican, which is replete in Islam, in Judaism, and in the Christian church today. It is devoid of Jesus. And so I'm asking you to please partner with me to shut these people down. We need to have the Union of North America, or I should say the Commonwealth of North America. We need a Commonwealth. And it would have brought the people of Jamaica and the Bahamas, it would have given them safe haven here. But we had the British and we had all these other players, including the Jews for Israel, pulling us apart, and the bankers not wanting us to come together. I'm going to tell you, as an American, we have been supporting Europe forever. We were their dumping ground. And now they are relying upon people of African American descent to be the dumping ground for every African problem there is. Now here's the other problem. Oh, excuse me, I have to turn off my alarm. Here's the other problem. They are supporting sin and sex. These people who will do what they want to do, who want to have ritualistic sex, or these people who want to be the Vaticans and the males and the sex and the homosexuals and the sex and all of this and the sex, they have got to have sick mothers and children with AIDS. Because if they don't have sick mothers and children with AIDS, if they have you cleaning up your act, they don't get the support they need. Okay? I need you to step up to the bat, folks. You need to cut out their support. We're going to have to lose a few. Oh, and here's the other thing. They rely on the aborted fetuses of mostly girls in India, in China. They use their cells, they use their ovaries, they take everything that is about them and they use them for their research, or they use them for whatever it is they want to use them for, but they're slurping and eating up little baby girls. So what I've gotten from God is that these people who promoted these abortions are now the aborted. But they are doing this, and again, what I say, Elon Musk with his dragon, I have things online, so I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to show you these things first. Let's come out of me. I'd like you to take a look at, oh my dear, here we go. Let's take a look at him. This was Fiona Hill. Look at Fiona Hill's erection. That's claiming to be a woman, clearly a man, was a chief advisor for Russia under President Trump. And President Trump has another homosexual who is his very highest chief advisor right this minute as well. Nobody in the media pointed this out. That is disgusting. And he sits there and talks about his womanly feelings. Do you see this? A concerted effort has been made, and has always been made, to use homosexual men, because some men became homosexuals in order to be non-threatening to other men, like their brothers or other people. Some came in order to be over religious institutions, but they still engage in sex. And some are just psychopaths, okay? But they've used it in order to deride and to diminish women by taking control over what should be their jobs in their own sphere, and in order for them to find their own religious groundings. And they've taken our words, they've written all of history and everything. You should appreciate this as African Americans, the fact that women have no voice in their own history. And by looking at that Bible, you have to say to yourself, obviously that God has, if you look at how they view God and what God allowed them to do, or what their men were doing, clearly clearly something is wrong here in terms of women, right? And they have been throwing a tizzy fit since the beginning of the 1900s when they found out that women have 3.5% more DNA than men do, and it's on the X chromosome. Since this period of time, they have been full blast in terms of trying to erode the rights of women and taking over our positions and our roles. And they've done it in the most insidious, diabolical ways. They've used African American men to help do this. Think about that. So instead of backing, I'm asking African American men, instead of backing what Jesus clearly says is sexual sin, and fornication before marriage, pornography is part of forn, as well as homosexuality and adultery is sexual sin. Polygamy is sexual sin. I'm asking you to help us stamp that out so that we stamp out the AIDS and all the other things that these wicked anarchists are using against humanity. It says in Genesis, they are the Balaam. They are the Balaam. They're the occultists, and Solomon was a wicked occultist. Now let's go in and take a look at a few more pictures, and then I have to get into the African American things. I just wanted to hold on to that, increasing new brain cells. This has come to my attention. Oh no. Oh, here we go. I invite you to see how wicked we are. This is white, by the way. This is all white. Okay. I want to take one more look at this so that you understand. And Rene Richards was a Jewish man who first became, and that person clearly is walking in to the congressional hearing with an erection, and nobody in the news covered it, but I did. I have them contacting me, telling me, oh, this person was one who went after me. He cleared everything off my server, off my phone. Here we go. I'm just trying to get down to this other area so we can look at the sports people. Oh, okay. I'll put us on pause. Oh, I'm just going to point out when I showed up on August the 21st, 2017 to report that it was the British and Barack Obama that had set up the hackings and that, and they were looking to give everything over to the British in North America. And Barack Obama, for Africa, they sent a man out to harass me for 6 months. Whoa, what am I doing that's wrong here? Well, I best go like this. And he was real. For 6 weeks, and I couldn't even report him. I went to the police. I went to everything. I'm still looking. I don't know where I have this. So let's go in. All right, here is a picture of Serena Williams without his boobies on. And the Russians pointed out for years that they were not feminine and they were men, and other African American men have seen it as well. The same appears to be true of Corey Gaff. Here he is again without these big boobs that he goes wielding. All of a sudden we have big boobs. Okay, no we don't. Where are these big boobs? That's, okay. But This is not the only one. That's clearly a boy. That's not a girl. There's Coco Gauff, who's the boy in the picture. This is an Australian tennis player. And all of this is to just, that's a Canadian. Judge sides with trans athletes against girls who just want fairness. And he says, girls who can't beat me or women who can't beat me are just losers. These are demonic occultists. He is a demonic occultist. This is actually a little boy with the women's group, and they hide them in hair and things like that. But the problem is that the African American ones are not even admitting that they're men. These people, well, I mean, that one hasn't yet, but that one has admitted transgenderism, and some of the other runners have, but that's clearly not a girl. That's clearly not a girl. All right, let's come out of this. This, I need you to look at. Revisiting slavery. Ethiopian slavery and the slave trade in Ethiopia. The Ethiopians, who we call Cush, who say everything deals with Solomon, probably yes, because they're wicked, all right, engaged in the butchering of men and women to produce them into eunuchs or to sexually sterilize them. The Sudan, the Somalis, they actually engaged in raiding that went into Kenya and other areas of Africa, and they did not stop this until the Crown Prince used it as a main way of getting money, until Italy invaded them in 1930. And then they stopped it only to get international support. I just learned that. Now, it's time that people that consider themselves believers in Jesus look at churches and say, no, you don't pass the litmus test. So when we look at Rome and these other churches, no, they're not passing the litmus test. They don't teach the Noahide. They just teach you that you can do what you, and then you just go to heaven. No, 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 no. No, you're not passing the litmus test. You're not. And if we look at the Coptic Christians who engaged in the slavery and the mutilation, that they cut off the penises and the testicles of mostly African boys, sometimes white boys. This is, I don't know how they weren't excommunicated for heresy a long time ago. They should have been excommunicated for heresy a long time ago. There is no way anybody should see, there is nothing to save. Nothing. There's nothing in the churches that supported them to save. There's nothing in the churches that are supporting polygamy in Africa, and polygamy in Africa is about violence against other men. There's nothing to save. There is nothing to save in these churches. And it's like what Jesus says, you cannot take an old wineskin and put new wine into it. It's just like what the prophets say in the Old Testament, where Jesus says, look out for the scribes and the Pharisees. Hey, folks, there are religious leaders today. It's just like the Old Testament. We have to literally take down all the idols that they worship, crush them, And I'm asking you to help me crush not just the idolatry, but the outright diabolical occult that's going on. When we go into Ethiopia, when we look at these people, they are part of an elite. These half white, half black, very light white people, whether it's Reverend Wright in Chicago, or whether it's Al Sharpton, whether it's Jesse Jackson, whether it's, it doesn't, Barack Obama, whether they are all part of the same elite group, and they actually work together, and they work in areas of perversion with white people, because they're doing this stuff with Elon Musk that is going to exterminate you. They are willing to give everyone a shot that has nanotechnology that I've already been given. I mean, they've already worked to destroy my lymphatic glands underneath, and I caught it in the fall when it happened to me in November. They're already doing this. So they're using Black Lives Matter as a mask, and it's really the occult. And Mr. Trump has been a part of it. His daughter's name is Goat, and she was given over to the Jewish people. I'm asking you to help me shut down the occult wherever it's found. And I'm asking African American educators and also educators from Jamaica and in those areas. I'm finding that the people from Haiti, why didn't they go back to Africa when they got their freedom? Why didn't they say, let's do business deals and we'll do business back and forth and you can have something going on here in the United States? Why didn't they do that? We can't take responsibility for everybody. So I'm going to ask you, as African Americans, you were taken from the western part of Africa. You were not taken from the eastern part of Africa, the Horn. That's Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia. That has nothing to do with us. Leave it alone. I need to try to get the South Africans that are white out of Africa so that we can have peace with Elon Musk, okay? Because we don't need him eradicating the world, and he's concerned about those people. But then South Africa should be for South Africa, and Africa should be for Africa. But it's important that you let go of these politicians that are about Kenya and Somalia and Ethiopia, because just like the people from Europe or the Israel or whatever they are, they're not for us either, okay? We all have to fall under geo-regionalization, and we all have to be concerned about the Noahide. That's what we have to be concerned about. And our Shabbat, our 7-day Shabbat, that should be from Friday night through Saturday night. That's the Shabbat. And it shouldn't be a problem for the people that are from Egypt, because they never had a Sunday Shabbat anyway. Let's go into this. The Sunday Shabbat is about Rome, and we need to get rid of the red dragon, period. And the Shabbat is about the 7 and the Noahide, and the 7 and what God said we had to do in order to not be destroyed. And we had to not destroy the animals. Revisiting slavery and the slave trade in Ethiopia. All right. Let's look at the abstract. Slavery remains one of the blind spots in the historiography of the Horn of Africa in general, and Ethiopia in particular. This is peculiar in light of the fact that the territories of the Horn slavery left a significant imprint on the socio-cultural fabric, and that the ports along the Horn of Africa coast fed the slave trade to the Arabs, Ottomans, and Indian Ocean worlds for many centuries. In this article, we highlight some of the research trends on slavery in Africa and discuss slavery and the slave trade in different Ethiopian regions. We also question the public silence around the legacy of slavery in the country. And they're talking about the legacy of slavery in Ethiopia. By means of introducing the articles of this special issue, we point towards new pending or unresolved research questions. The development or the creation of Solomon as this superhero did not happen until after the captivity in Babylonia, coming back in the Chaldeans, and they brought back a lot of occult with them. Solomon was not this great guy. Solomon enslaved much of his own land, and the person he kept was an Ammonite whose son engaged in human sacrifice. That splintered the country. The northern tribes went up and then worshipped the Baal from Babylon, and the ones in the south worshipped the demon gods from Moab and the Ammonites. That particular region, David lost. That short unified region, David lost because of his affair. And David is real. And Psalms 80 tells you that they're surrounded and they're lost. When he lost his Hurrian and Hittite allies, everything crumbled. And the Phoenicians and the Moabites and the Ammonites took over. In fact, Moshe is actually a Moabite king. It's interesting what happens here. When we talk about Solomon and we talk about the Queen of Sheba, we're also talking about Bathsheba. When we talk about the Queen of Sheba in this particular piece of mythology, we're not looking at a man. He's not Jewish. Solomon's not Jewish. He's an occultist and he's a pagan. All right? The wife he keeps is an occultist and a pagan. Naamah. There's nothing Jewish going on here. The Jews themselves, the real Jews, don't believe in genital mutilation. Never have. They do a lot of things that are wrong, but genital mutilation is not one of the things they're into. And they do many things that are wrong, but they don't do genital mutilation. Remember, they take the men, they circumcise them. The women they keep as sex slaves or as people in their domestic, but they don't engage in genital mutilation. That's not the thing that they do. The Christians who wanted to take over the area with Rome, they allowed that to happen. So this is not of the Nazarenes. The Nazarenes, who were what I represent, the Jesus people, would never engage in that level of slavery and genital mutilation, ever. You became a slave if you owed people something, if you were a criminal with something, and then you paid certain things off, like an indentured slave. You never stayed that way forever. Ever. Okay? The Ethiopians are not good people. They're using you. When they come in and talk about their great culture and they go into Jamaica and it's the Ethiopians, and when they go into the Mexicans and it's the Ethiopians, and it's how you supported the Ethiopians were slave traders who engaged in genital mutilation. They're not good people. They're using you. Stop it. Spend time helping me to put this thing together and getting rid of the occult. Please, I can't put the thing together unless I get rid of the occult. And if you think it's bad, look at Boris Johnson. They're busy complaining about you and the baby mamas. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of... excuse me, May could have done this, and she's a real Adam with her husband, male and female. She's not a slut like Boris Johnson. How many baby mamas does he have? He openly is a cultist. He's an open occultist, okay? Openly so. And his wife is a third-generation illegitimate child. Her father is an illegitimate child from an adulterous relationship. She is an illegitimate child from an adulterous. Her father committed adultery. I mean, that as well. And her child that she had is an illegitimate adulterous relationship, and it's sitting in 10 Downing Street, and they're full of the occult. If I were to go in and take over as queen, I'd have to get rid of all of the occult. I can't handle it. I can't go into it. Here we go. Let's go into this. This is lovely. He's a philanthropist, no different than our Jewish philanthropist or our Microsoft philanthropist, and they're not really interested in you. Remember, they didn't change the education system. Did Barack Obama send his children to public schools? Will they send their children to a public schools? No, they'll let Elon Musk destroy you first. Okay. Okay? He's not here to help you folks. He's a troublemaker. And I'm going to tell you right this minute, the British are acting like troublemakers. Africa's harrowing tale of its first slavers, the Arabs, and we're looking at, and it's all being processed through Ethiopia. Now this was important because they actually go in but he talks about the Turks and the Ottoman Empire and how that was there. And he talks about these people, and they weren't just slaving them, they were slaving white people too. The Ottomans, Islam was slaving white peoples like nobody's business. 4.1 million, so that's 7.1, 1.2, 4.1. I mean, this is all coming from the Western coast. And Kenya, that has all that polygamy and all those clitorectomies, and get this, Ethiopia went into these areas and got slaves to sell to them and engaged in that form of genital mutilation against them. Why? They preferred women for sex slaves. Look at this. They were turned into concubines living in harems and rarely as wives, their children becoming free or their children being discharged. A large number of male slaves, young boys, were castrated and turned into eunuchs who kept watch over the harems. Castration was particularly brutal. Operation survival of 10%. That was all happening in Ethiopia with the Coptic Christians. Excuse me? I see nothing. They're not Christians. They don't even apologize. Holy smokes, they don't do anything. There we go. And they talk about how the Arabian trade was outlawed in Ethiopia in 1935 in order to gain international support against the Italian invasion. When you read this article is so horrible. This is such a horrible article. Oh my goodness, it's such a horrible article. This is so horrible. Please read this article. But when we look at the occult, I'm asking you, all right, Coptic Christians, and Islam. Look at this, the House of Solomon. The house of the occultist. The House of Solomon. Even if it was true, what? He had a baby mama? The occultist had a baby mama? You can't have 1,000 wives. That's not a husband. That's just a demon. It's just a demon. More than one wife, you're killing another man. Somebody's being killed. There you go. There you have it. So I'm asking you, I'm reaching out to you, and I need to say goodbye. And I wanted to preface this by saying you're not the biggest cultist right this minute going on. There's some really brilliant ones out there. I was born with red hair, by the way, and we tend to be a really big problem. But I'm going to tell you to look out for the blondes. And I don't care if they're blonde white people, if they're blonde Chinese, or lighter colored Chinese, or if they are the blonde African Americans, like Reverend Wright, like Elon Musk. I mean, not Elon Musk, excuse me, I take that one back, like Barack Obama, like this Ethiopian prince. Oh no, they're just users, honey. They're just users and players. And they did not give you what they wanted. If they had, your whole lives would have been so much different. God bless.